A story of betrayal, shadows, and unbreakable karma. She came into Amara's life looking like a miracle. She left in handcuffs. But between those two moments, she almost destroyed everything: the career, the marriage, the mind, and the name that Amara had spent 40 years building. This is not just a story about betrayal. This is a story about what happens when a lion forgets it is a lion. Part 1. The woman in the parking lot. The sun had barely finished setting over the city when Amara pulled her white Mercedes into the underground parking lot of her architecture firm. It had been a brutal Friday. 3 client presentations, 1 collapsed contractor deal, and a board meeting that had stretched 2 hours past its scheduled end. Amara was exhausted in the kind of way that goes deeper than the bones, the kind of tired that settles in the soul. She was walking toward the elevator when she heard it. A soft, broken sound, like something small trying not to be heard. She stopped. There, curled between a concrete pillar and a green recycling bin, sat a young woman. She looked no older than 25. Her clothes were clean but threadbare: a beige blouse with a small tear at the collar, jeans that had been washed so many times the color had bled out to a pale, defeated blue. She had a small canvas tote bag pressed to her stomach, and she was crying. Not dramatically, not for an audience. She was crying the way people cry when they have given up expecting anyone to notice. Amara stopped walking. She was a practical woman. She had built her architectural firm from a single drafting table in a 1-bedroom apartment. She had negotiated contracts with men twice her age and twice her arrogance. She did not make impulsive decisions. But something about the silence around that girl, the way the entire parking lot seemed to be ignoring her like a ghost, made Amara's chest tighten. "Hey," Amara called softly. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen, her lips trembling. But they were beautiful eyes, dark and deep, with a kind of bruised intelligence behind them that made Amara pause. "I'm fine," the girl said quickly, wiping her face with the back of her wrist. "Please don't worry about me. I'll be gone in a minute." "Gone where?" Amara asked, looking around at the empty lot, the darkening city beyond the exit ramp. "It's almost 9 o'clock. The girl looked down, her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I had an interview here today in the building above for a receptionist job. They said I was perfect on the phone, but when I got here," she stopped, swallowed. "When I got here in person, they said the position had already been filled. 3 hours on the bus and they didn't even..." She pressed her lips together hard. "I'll be fine, I just need a moment." Amara looked at her for a long time. Later, she would try to remember what it was exactly that made her do what she did next. Maybe it was the torn collar. Maybe it was the 3 hours on the bus. Maybe it was the way the girl said "I'll be fine" the same way Amara herself had said it 20 years ago, sitting alone in a hospital waiting room after her mother's diagnosis, with $40 in her account and no one to call. She reached into her bag and pulled out her business card. "My name is Amara. I run the firm upstairs. I don't have a receptionist position, but I do have a guest room and a very large pot of jollof rice that my housekeeper made this morning. Come." The girl blinked. "I can't just..." "You can," Amara said simply. "Come." The girl's name was Lena. Lena Osai, she said. She was from a small town 3 states away. Her mother had died 6 months ago. Her landlord had evicted her 2 weeks after the funeral, and she had been surviving on couch surfing and temporary gigs ever since. She told the story quietly, without self-pity, which made Amara believe every word. She brought her home to the estate. Her husband, David, was in the living room watching football when they walked in. He looked up surprised. "David, this is Lena. She's going to stay with us for a few days while she gets back on her feet." Amara said it the way she said most things, as a statement, not a question. David looked at the girl, then at his wife. He knew better than to argue with Amara when her voice had that particular quality to it. "Welcome, Lena," he said, and went back to his game. That night, as Lena ate her first hot meal in what she said had been days, tears kept streaming silently down her face. She kept wiping them away as if embarrassed by them. "You don't have to hide them," Amara told her gently. Lena shook her head. "I didn't think people like you still existed." Amara smiled. "People like me, people who just help without wanting something back." Amara reached over and squeezed her hand. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we figure out the next chapter." She walked to her bedroom that night feeling full in a way that had nothing to do with the food. She felt purposeful, righteous. She had helped someone tonight. She could not have known as she drifted to sleep that the girl at her dinner table had never once cried a genuine tear, not once in her entire adult life. Part 2, the slow takeover. Lena stayed for 3 days. Then 3 days became a week. Then a week became a month. And with each passing day, she made herself less like a guest and more like a fixture. The kind of thing that was always there, always useful, always just present enough that you forgot the house had ever existed without her. She began cooking breakfast before Amara was awake. Not lavish meals, just simple, perfect things. David scrambled eggs the exact way he liked them, slightly underdone with a pinch of paprika that he mentioned once in passing on day 2, and which Lena never forgot. Amara's green smoothie, always ready at 6:47 a.m., precisely 12 minutes before Amara walked into the kitchen. It was a detail that should have been impossible to know, and yet Lena knew it. She reorganized the kitchen pantry quietly, efficiently, without being asked. She learned the names of the gardener, the part-time cleaner, and the security guard at the gate, and she charmed every single one of them within 2 weeks. "She's remarkable," David said one evening, watching Lena fold laundry in the sitting room with the careful precision of someone doing origami. "Where did you find her again?" "In the parking garage, crying," Amara said, not looking up from her laptop. "And you just brought her home?" "Yes." David was quiet for a moment. "She's very attentive. She remembered I had a meeting with the minister's office today and she ironed my best suit without being asked." "She's grateful," Amara said. "She just wants to be useful." But even as she said it, something small and nameless stirred at the edge of Amara's awareness. Not alarm, not yet, just a tiny ripple, like a pebble dropped in still water. She ignored it. That was her first mistake. Lena's next move was so elegant it was almost invisible. She began to study Amara, not obviously, not the way a stalker studies their subject, but with the patient, methodical precision of a scientist observing a specimen. She noted the exact pitch of Amara's laugh. She memorized the way Amara tucked her left hand under her chin when she was thinking. She discovered that Amara's greatest professional insecurity was being dismissed as a diversity hire by male architects, and she began weaving subtle affirmations of Amara's talent into casual conversations, watching the walls come down with each one. She made herself indispensable to David in different ways. Where Amara brought energy and achievement to their home, Lena brought stillness. She listened to David talk about his work, the pressure of running his logistics company, the loneliness of sitting at the top, with an intensity that made him feel genuinely understood. She never competed with Amara. She simply filled the spaces Amara, in her perpetual motion, didn't know she was leaving empty. 3 months in, Lena had become the invisible spine of the household. And she had David trusting her like a brother trusts a confidant. The predator had found her angles. Now it was time to use them. Part 3. When the fog descended, it started with small things. Amara began misplacing her phone. Her calendar notifications would disappear. She would set a reminder for a 9 a.m. client call and then find at 9:12 that the reminder had been deleted. The client would be furious. Amara would be bewildered. "You rescheduled it yourself, Amara," Lena would say, her voice thick with concern. "Yesterday afternoon, don't you remember, you said you needed time to review the revised blueprints." "I didn't reschedule it, Lena." "You did, sweetheart, you were on the phone in the garden, I heard you myself." David would look up from across the table with that expression, the one Amara was starting to dread. The expression that was half worry and half something else. Something that looked disturbingly like doubt. Amara began drinking the chamomile tea Lena prepared every evening. It tasted faintly medicinal, but Lena had told her it was a special blend from a natural wellness shop, good for stress and mental clarity. Amara trusted her. She was always tired lately. The tea helped her sleep. She didn't know what was in it. The incidents accelerated. Amara's most important client, a government infrastructure contract worth $18 million, received an email from what appeared to be Amara's professional address, citing a personal family emergency and requesting the project be paused indefinitely. Amara only discovered this when the client's assistant called 2 weeks later to check on the family situation. Amara was sitting in her office, staring at a sent message she had no memory of sending, when Lena knocked softly on the door. "Amara, I'm worried about you." "I didn't send this, Lena." Lena came in and sat down, her face arranged in the expression of someone watching a friend suffer. "I know you don't remember, that's what I'm worried about. David mentioned you've been sleepwalking again." "I have never sleepwalked in my life." "You did it twice last week. I found you in the kitchen at 2 a.m. You were just standing there, Amara, eyes open but not there. I didn't want to frighten you. I guided you back to bed." A gentle pause. "I think you need to see a doctor. I'm scared you might be developing something. Early onset can look like stress at first, I've read about it." Amara felt the floor tilt beneath her. She didn't notice as she sat in the fog of confusion and Lena's carefully chosen words that Lena was wearing her perfume. Not a similar one, hers. The custom blended Moroccan rose oil that Amara had ordered exclusively for herself from an artisan in Marrakesh. She didn't notice because she was too busy trying to remember something she had never done. That evening, David came home and found Amara sitting alone in the dark. He sat beside her. He took her hand. But when he spoke, his words were not the words of a husband rallying to fight beside his wife. They were the words of a man who had already been told what to think. "Amara, Lena spoke to me. She's really concerned. She thinks, and I think you might need to see a specialist. Your company is suffering, you're forgetting things, maybe you should step back from the firm for a little while, let someone else hold the reins. Someone like who? David, he hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. I just mean someone capable. Amara looked at her husband, the man she had built 17 years of life with, and she saw, for the first time, the unmistakable shadow of another woman's influence sitting behind his eyes. She pulled her hand away from his. I want to be alone, she said quietly. She sat in the dark for a long time after he left, and then slowly the fog parted just enough for one clear, cold thought to cut through. This is not illness, this is architecture. Someone is building a prison around me, one wall at a time. Part 4. The evidence beneath the floorboards. Amara had designed buildings for 20 years. She understood the anatomy of structures, how they looked on the surface and what they concealed beneath. She understood that the most dangerous weak point in any structure was always the foundation. She decided to look at Lena's foundation. She waited until Lena took David to the Saturday farmers' market, a ritual Lena had introduced 3 months ago, cheerfully volunteering to take David so that Amara could rest. Rest. The word had begun to feel like a cage. Amara moved through the house with a quietness that her exhaustion had been suppressing for weeks. She went to the guest suite Lena had long since made her own. The room was immaculate, but Amara had designed houses. She knew where people hid things. She checked behind the bathroom mirror. Nothing. She checked under the mattress. Nothing. Then she looked at the wardrobe. Inside, hung neatly among Lena's clothes, Amara's clothes, she realized with a twist of nausea. At least 6 dresses from Amara's wardrobe, hanging there as naturally as if they had always belonged to someone else. And at the back, behind a row of shoes, a medium-sized locked metal box. Amara had a full set of skeleton keys in her desk from a restoration project she had worked on years ago. It took her 45 seconds to find the right one. Inside the box was a photograph album. The first photo made her breath stop. It was David, taken from across a restaurant, telephoto style, intimate and unknowing. It was dated 18 months ago. 6 months before Lena appeared in that parking garage. She turned the pages. More photos, David at his office, David at the gym, David and Amara at a charity gala. There were printed screenshots of David's social media. There were notes, handwritten, meticulous, analyzing David's schedule, his known associates, his financial worth and his wife's professional reputation. There was a page that listed Amara's weaknesses, her insecurities, her emotional triggers. And then at the back of the album, tucked into a cardboard sleeve, 3 laminated newspaper clippings. 3 obituaries, 3 women, all wealthy, all prominent, all married to successful men. The first had died of a sudden cardiac episode, officially attributed to undiagnosed heart disease. The second had suffered a mental breakdown, been committed to a private facility, and had died 6 months later of what her death certificate listed as complications from acute psychiatric deterioration. The third had drowned in her own swimming pool. Her husband had remarried within a year. Below each obituary in the same meticulous handwriting was a single name. Vivian Cole, Lena's real name. Amara sat on the floor of the guest room and felt the ground beneath her shift completely. This was not a desperate young woman she had rescued from a parking garage. This was not someone grateful for a hot meal and a soft bed. This was a hunter, and Amara had not rescued her. She had opened the gate and invited her straight in. She replaced everything exactly as she had found it. Then she locked the box, replaced it behind the shoes and walked to her own bedroom. She sat at her vanity. She looked at herself in the mirror for a long time, and then she did what she had always done when faced with a structural problem that seemed impossible. She began to design the solution. Part 5. The MASTRSTROKE. Amara had 3 advantages that Vivian Cole, Lena, had underestimated. The first was that Amara had not, despite everything, become fully compromised. She had stopped drinking the chamomile tea 4 days ago, pouring it carefully into the soil of the potted fern in her bedroom each morning, and her mind had been sharpening ever since, slowly and surely, like a blade being honed in the dark. The second was that Amara's architectural firm had installed a discreet but comprehensive property surveillance system across the entire estate 2 years ago, following a break-in at a neighbor's house. The system recorded audio and video in all common areas. The control panel was disguised as a circuit breaker box in Amara's private study, a room Lena had never been given access to. The recordings backed up to an encrypted cloud drive that only Amara could access. She spent one night reviewing 6 months of footage. What she found was methodical and devastating. She watched Lena access her laptop 3 times while Amara was asleep. She watched Lena intercept 2 physical letters from a law firm, letters that Amara had never received and never known existed. She watched Lena in the kitchen at night, carefully measuring something from a small amber vial into a ceramic teapot. She had everything she needed. The third advantage was this: Amara had a lawyer. Not a family lawyer. A former prosecutor turned private attorney named Josephine Addo, who Amara had known since university and who had seen exactly this kind of predatory scheme twice before in her career. Amara called Josephine, not from the house phone. From a burner SIM she purchased with cash at a roadside vendor on a Tuesday morning while pretending to run an errand. "Joe," she said when the call connected, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. And I need you to trust me completely." "Always," Josephine said. "Talk." Amara talked for 40 minutes. Part 6. The day of reckoning. Lena had made her final move on a Thursday. She had by that point convinced David that Amara needed to be checked into a private mental wellness retreat. Not forcibly, she was too smart for that. She had constructed it as an act of love. She had printed information brochures. She had left wellness articles on David's nightstand. She had cried gently in the kitchen one evening while telling David about finding Amara standing at the edge of the swimming pool in the middle of the night, staring down. David, hollowed out by months of carefully planted doubt and loneliness, had agreed. He had made the call. The retreat was booked. Amara was told that evening over dinner, presented as a decision made in love, with Lena sitting at the table's edge, her face arranged in an expression of tearful concern. "Just a few weeks," David said, his voice strained, "just to help you reset." "I understand," Amara said calmly. Lena's eyes lifted to meet hers for just a moment. In that moment, a microsecond that David missed completely, Lena's expression changed. The concern vanished. What replaced it was barely perceptible. A tiny flash of cold satisfaction, the look of a chess player watching their opponent pick up a piece and not yet realize it is a trap. Amara smiled back, serenely, knowingly. That was the moment Lena should have felt afraid, but she was too confident to read it. The following morning, a black car arrived at 10 a.m. to take Amara to the retreat. David stood at the door with Lena behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder in a gesture of support that was so precisely positioned it had been rehearsed. Amara came down the stairs dressed immaculately. Silk blouse, diamond studs. Her architect's posture, straight, unbowed, architectural. Stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at her husband. "David," she said, "before I go I need you to do one thing for me." "Amara, one thing, go to my study. Open the circuit breaker panel on the left wall. There's a grey tablet behind the fourth fuse row. Bring it here." David frowned. Lena's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on his shoulder. "David," Lena said softly. She might be confused again. "The car is, go and get it." "David," Amara said, her voice did not shake. It was the voice she used in boardrooms when she was closing deals that no one believed she could close. "Please." David went. The 3 minutes he was gone were the most silent 3 minutes in the history of that house. Amara and Lena stood in the foyer and looked at each other without speaking. The performance was over, both of them knew it. Lena was calculating exits, Amara was waiting. David returned with the tablet. "Play the last file in the folder marked November," Amara told him. He pressed play. The footage began. Lena standing in Amara's kitchen at 11:47 p.m., the amber vial, the teapot, her face perfectly clear in the night vision recording, unhurried, deliberate. Then, from a different date, Lena at Amara's laptop. Then Lena opening the physical letters, reading them and placing them at the bottom of her tote bag. And then the audio. Vivian Cole, because that was who she was, speaking on the phone 3 weeks earlier, in a conversation she had clearly believed was private, conducted in the back garden at 1 a.m. The husband is completely turned. "Give me another 3 weeks and the wife will be in the facility. After that it's the same as the others. I'll stretch it to 6 months, make sure the divorce is clean, and then the estate transfers naturally once the second round of treatment starts. She won't fight it. She'll be too far gone." And the husband, is he suspicious? He hasn't been suspicious of a single thing I've told him since month 2. These men, they all want the same thing, someone to make them feel like the most important person in the room. Give them that and they'll walk off a cliff for you. The recording ended. The room was absolutely still. David's face had gone the color of ash. He looked at the tablet in his hands as if he had never seen it before. Then he looked at the woman standing behind him, the woman whose hand was still on his shoulder, and he stepped forward and away from her touch as if it burned. "Who are you?" he whispered. Lena Vivian said nothing for a long moment. The soft, fragile mask had been stripped away completely now. What remained was something entirely different, precise, cold, ancient with calculation. "You don't know how long I waited to get into a house like this," she said finally, her voice stripped of every warmth it had ever performed. "How many months I spent studying you both. You think that parking garage was an accident. I had been watching you for a year, Amara. A year. You were perfect, kind, successful, distracted, the ideal mark." She looked at David with something close to contempt. And you were lonely, that's all it takes, you know. A lonely husband and a wife too busy building empires to sit still for 5 minutes. I didn't manufacture anything. I just used what was already broken. At that moment the front door opened. Josephine Addo walked in, followed by two plainclothes police officers who had been parked discreetly at the end of the driveway since 9 a.m. Vivian Cole, Josephine said, "You are being arrested in connection with 3 counts of criminal fraud, 2 counts of suspected wrongful death, 1 count of unlawful medication administration and tampering with communications. You have the right to remain silent." Vivian looked at the officers, then at Amara. For just a moment the composure cracked, not into tears, not into pleading, but into something rower. Fury. "You were supposed to be the soft one," she said to Amara, her voice low and shaking. "I was kind," Amara replied, standing completely still. "There is a difference. You mistook my kindness for blindness. That was your only real mistake." As the officers led Vivian Cole out of the house in handcuffs, Amara walked to the front window and watched the police car pull out of the driveway. She watched until it turned the corner and disappeared. Then she turned around. David was sitting in the armchair by the fireplace with his head in his hands. He was not crying. He was the kind of broken that lives beyond tears, the kind that comes from realizing you nearly handed someone you loved to a predator because you were too proud to look at the space growing between you. Amara walked over. She didn't take his hand. Not yet. "She was right about one thing," Amara said quietly. "Something was already broken, we just didn't look at it long enough to see it." David looked up. "I'm sorry, Amara, I know you are," she said, "but sorry is just a word. We have work to do, real work, the kind that isn't done by a stranger who wants something from us. It has to be done by us." She picked up her car keys from the console table. "I'm going to the office. There's an $18 million contract that needs to be resurrected and a phone call that needs to be made. When I come home tonight we are going to have dinner, just us, and we are going to begin the very long conversation we should have had a year ago." She walked to the front door. She paused with her hand on the brass handle. "And David, get rid of the chamomile tea." Part 6. The morning after 3 months later, the estate looked the same on the outside. The roses were still blooming along the garden path. The iron gates still opened with the same deep mechanical sigh. The marble foyer still caught the morning light and split it into fragments across the floor. But inside, everything was different. The guest suite had been converted into a home library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, 2 reading chairs facing each other by the window, and a small fireplace that David had installed himself over 2 weekends, badly and imperfectly, with Amara handing him tools and laughing every time something went wrong. It was the most beautiful room in the house. Vivian Cole was awaiting trial. Forensic investigators, once tipped off by Josephine, had reopened the inquest into 2 of the 3 deaths listed in those newspaper clippings. New evidence was being examined. The case was significant enough that 3 national newspapers had picked it up. The $18 million infrastructure contract had been reinstated. The client had accepted Amara's explanation, supported by Josephine's documentation proving the email had been sent without Amara's knowledge, with a grace that Amara would never forget. On a Thursday evening, 6 months to the day after a young woman with a torn collar had cried in a parking garage, Amara was standing in the garden when her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered. "Ms. Amara," a young woman's voice. Nervous, genuine. "I'm so sorry to call directly, but I found your number on the architecture firm's website. I am a recent graduate. I have been applying for junior architect positions for 8 months and I keep being turned down without an interview. I know this is not how things are done, but I didn't know who else to call. I'm not asking for a job, I'm asking for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes of your time to show you my portfolio." Amara listened to the voice, the nervousness. The dignity underneath the nervousness. She thought of a parking garage, a torn collar, a choice made in the dark. She thought of what that choice had cost her. She thought of what it would have cost her to never have made it at all. What kind of woman she would be if fear of being deceived once made her close every door forever. "What is your name?" Amara asked. "Adebayo Ma Adebayo Nwasu. Come to my office on Monday at 9, Amara said. "Bring your full portfolio. You'll have 30 minutes, not 10. Make them count." She hung up the phone. She stood in the garden for a long time looking at the city lights that had just begun to appear on the horizon as the last light died in the sky. The air smelled like night-blooming jasmine and the faint memory of rain. Amara was still kind. That had not been taken from her. She had simply learned the way that truly great architects always learn, that kindness without structure eventually collapses, that an open heart still needs a foundation, that you can let in the light without removing every wall. She walked back inside. She locked the door. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt the particular, unshakable peace of a woman who is fully, completely, dangerously awake. The moral Amara's story teaches us that kindness is not a flaw, generosity is not weakness. Wisdom, the wisdom to watch, to notice, to trust your instincts when something feels wrong, to build evidence before you break, that is the armor that protects the open heart. Not every person crying in the rain deserves your shelter, but don't let the one who did not deserve it take away your capacity to offer it to the one who will. What do you think? Was Amara right to open her home to a stranger? If you were in her position, what would you have done differently? Let me know in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today.